Throb Forever. Yo, heart throb.
All right, this is a post that I needed to put up. No, I haven't posted anything for a while because YouTube is seriously aggravating with this monetization thing. And actually a lot of content creators are complaining about it, but I didn't really create it for that so much anyway, although I, kind of got swept into expecting it to happen just due to the lack of real informative content. Everybody's too focused on creating the AI content and all of that. But anyway, I'm posting this today because, riding around any city and looking at the amount of homeless people that we have, littered on the streets and just roaming around everywhere. This is getting out of control. And what occurred to me was that, a lot of people are homeless and actually remain homeless. Now, this is messed up. A lot of people are homeless and remain homeless because, and a lot of times they've lost like all of their personal possessions. They've whether it be to evictions, whether it's their fault or something that they couldn't help, whether they are drug addicts and maybe them being homeless is their fault. But what we do know is that there are a lot of people, whether they've been irresponsible or not, like this homelessness thing isn't discriminating against people. You know what I'm saying? So for every person that was irresponsible, there's one or more who were responsible. So the problem is, a lot of times when these people are homeless, and I don't know why it never really occurred to me before, when they're homeless, you see that they're homeless and, sometimes they might have a grocery cart they pushing around or a backpack or something like that. But some of them don't even have that with them. But if they're homeless, they don't have a whole lot of personal possessions. And the thing that stood out to me is that, okay, if they don't have their personal possessions with them, do they have an ID with them? Like a government issued ID, a state ID, a driver's license or whatever. If they're homeless, a lot of times these things get lost. So I started just doing some research into it. And what I'm finding out is this. Many states, and I don't know if it's all states or just a lot of them, but many states require a permanent residential address in order to issue government identification. So that means that even if the homeless person does have their social security card, birth certificate, these states are saying that that's not enough. You have to have a permanent or an established mailing address or home address. Now, this is extremely problematic because what that's saying is, even though you are a natural born citizen to the United States, you have a social security number in the card and a birth certificate. And those are truly the only valid documents outside of a passport. But those two documents are the only documents that are supposed to be required for identification or proof of citizenship to obtain a state ID or a driver's license. Now, this practice systematically, denying IDs to homeless citizens, this causes a problem because what you're doing is linking their proof of citizenship to an address. So what you're saying is that they either have to be a homeowner, or they have to be renting from a homeowner, or they have to. This is almost, in the line of, having to be validated by a property owner. That's very problematic, because what this does, by you limiting access to a homeless citizen because they don't have an established home address, you not giving them not allowing them to obtain an ID. This limits access to voting, to setting up bank accounts, receiving health care, being able to secure a job, employment, and even establishing housing and residences and other civil rights. Now, what's crazy about this is that people are talking about how they don't want people to be homeless, but by you denying them access to an ID, you're actually contributing to them being homeless longer if they ever come out of it. Because if you can't get an ID, even though you have other documents to prove that you are an American citizen, this is just wild to me, man. This is wild to me. So by making housing status and established residential addresses a precondition for identifications, the states are creating an internal proxy statelessness for homeless individuals. Like, they're essentially causing homeless citizens, or forcing them into a state of refugee or actual statelessness on their own homeland. You're forcing them to become stateless, or forcing them to be a refugee. And by proxy, eliminating them and forfeiting them from receiving, the perks and the benefits of the system that they were born into. You're forcing dependence on a bureaucratic recognition, and you're reproducing structural, systemic exclusion and restrictive laws based on homelessness. And to me, this is constitutionally illegal. It's a constitutional violation. Like the 14th Amendment, like the due process, citizens are denied IDs due to being homeless, even when presenting valid proof of citizenship. Birth certificate and social security card. You're killing their right to due process with the equal protection. Homeless citizens are treated worse than non-citizens or housed citizens. Homeless citizens are being denied rights because they are homeless. You're tying their right to a citizen benefit, which they are entitled to. An ID, a government issued ID, a state ID. You cannot deny homeless people an ID because they're homeless. You're making this about being a homeowner, or tying them to a person who owns a property to claim validation of their identity. You're also violating their First Amendment, their civic participation. Denying them that ID, impedes their engagement in public life. They can't vote. You're killing another constitutional fundamental right with, like I said, the right to vote, and then you're taxing them without representation. Citizens are effectively disenfranchised. Like, they're homeless, they don't have an established address, yet they pay taxes on all the goods that they buy, but they're not represented. They're not able to be represented because they don't have an ID. Like, this is unequal treatment. Some states provide IDs to undocumented immigrants while denying them to homeless citizens. Now, how the hell does that work? Clearly violating equal protection. Let me say it again. Some states, a lot of states, have provided IDs to undocumented immigrants while denying them to homeless citizens because they don't have an established address. That is a violation of equal protection. And thus being requiring a residential address to exercise citizenship rights is arbitrary and coercive. This is unconstitutional. Like denying this homeless person, access or the right to obtain an ID because they don't have an address. You're restricting access to essential services and civic participation. You're killing, you're making them basically socially invisible through systemic exclusion because they don't have an established address. This is criminal. And this is in line with like the slave codes and stuff, like the having to have papers and having to tell somebody where you're going, during slavery and all of that, like the government and systemic, bureaucratic dependence, which is analogous to those historical, coercive and oppressive structures, those oppressive systems. And like I said earlier, it just continues to add to the difficulty of homeless individuals, being able to resolve their homelessness. Like how quickly are they going to be able to become non-homeless or unhomeless if they can't get an ID, which is required to be unhomeless? Like if you don't have an ID, you can't rent a property. You can't. This shit is crazy, man. This is crazy. So I'm saying that, like right now, we have a federal imperative, meaning a federal emergency that the federal government is constitutionally obligated to protect homeless citizens, not just homeless citizens, but all citizens. But in this particular case, homeless citizens, their rights are being denied constitutionally under due process and equal protection. They're not being guaranteed access to identification because of not having a home address, not having an established home address. They're to be guaranteed access to an ID regardless of their housing status. The federal government must recognize that this is an imperative and an emergency because, otherwise, like I said, you're forcing them into internal statelessness and systemic exclusion. Like, I don't know why it took me this long to peep this thing. I guess when you running around living your life and as long as you ain't hurting or nothing like that, none of these things really matter. You don't really pay attention. You don't have a reason to look at it. And this is crazy because this is not something that these politicians who are supposed to be experts in constitutional law and all of this and that, how the hell they don't know this? And why are they permitting it to go on as long as they've allowed it to go on? Like the federal government and the people employed by the federal government, all these politicians, it's an imperative that they need to ensure that all natural born and naturalized citizens can obtain government issued IDs regardless of a permanent address. They need to recognize valid federal proof of citizenship, birth certificate, social security cards. That's it. They got to dismantle anything that's a structural barrier, that produces internal statelessness or refugeeism on their own homeland. Like we're sitting here driving around, going to work every day, going to buy food, living comfortably and looking at people on the street and not understanding that a lot of these people have been forced into statelessness and refugeeism. There's an imperative, an emergency to enforce this equal protection under the Constitution to prevent discrimination favoring non-citizens who can come here and get an ID and they don't have an address either. no state or administrative rule. Let me say this again. No state or any state created administrative rule, such as a requirement for a permanent residence, can override the constitutional rights of its citizens. Denying IDs to homeless citizens is illegal. It's unconstitutional, and it's morally reprehensible and indefensible. Federal action is imperative in this case. Citizens' rights cannot and should not have to wait on these so-called elites and politicians to fix this issue. This is heinous. This is heinous mismanagement of human rights, and they've allowed it to go on because nobody saw it, or maybe people did see it and said, fuck it, I don't care. This is crazy, man. So I had to put this post up today because this is ridiculous. Unreal. Anyway, if y'all happen to care about that at all, make sure y'all mention it to the people you talk to. Spread this post. Let people listen to this post. Do your own research. And take some type of responsibility, you know, and putting at least your 25 cents in the bucket towards eliminating some of this homelessness. A lot of times people don't even have to be homeless. They don't have to be homeless as long as they are if they could get an ID. An ID, man. A damn ID. I'm out.
Throb forever. Yo, heart throb.